Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome back to PandaAudioBooks, your sanctuary for ancient magic and the pursuit of the truth. Today, we delve into chapters 261 through 265 of Pursuit of the Truth. Su Ming has arrived at a hub of power where the elite of the land of South Morning gather. These are the descendants of the great tribes, individuals born with resources Su Ming could only dream of in his youth. But wealth and status are poor substitutes for the bone-deep survival instincts Su Ming forged in the frozen wastes. A storm is brewing in the auction houses and the meeting halls. Let's see how our lone wolf handles the pups of the great tribes. Beginning Chapter 261. Chapter 261, Shaman Hunt. Master could have killed him himself, but he wanted me to do it. Su Ming stood up, and once he looked around, a light flashed through his eyes and he sped forward like a ghost. It's because he saw that I wanted to join Sky Mist Shaman Hunt. That's why instead of having me experience the terrors of the shamans only at that time and fight against them without prior knowledge, he would rather give me this chance. He's allowing me to begin my very first shaman hunt. The light in Su Ming's eyes flickered. As he traveled through the forest, he would occasionally stop and observe the place before he continued onward. Sometimes, he would change his direction and continue the chase down another path. As time passed by, Su Ming started speeding up. The number of times he stopped also became fewer. He had already determined the location where his target was running, and even when he closed his eyes while he continued running, he could somewhat feel the now hideous man escaping in the direction before him with a dark expression, his white robes stained with blood. When a day passed by, Su Ming could feel that the distance between him and the other was rapidly closing up. Su Ming knew that this was the land of the shamans. There might be other shaman tribes within the forest. That was why he had to catch up to this man as soon as possible, and he had to kill him quickly as well. Dragging the fight out was something to be avoided at all costs. Else, not only would he be in danger, he might also face the risk of not being able to go back like his master had said if he went back too late and 3 days had gone by. Xianxia mentioned that he had 3 days, and hence Su Ming believed that he had 3 days and only 3 days. Perhaps the 3 days did not mean that Xianxia was not willing to wait, but instead meant that if 3 days went by, then someone who Xianxia might not be able to fight would appear. That was why he told Su Ming that he would only wait 3 days. Even right up till the end, Xianxia never said anything about wanting Su Ming to retrieve the man's head. He only told Su Ming to chase him down. Su Ming understood all of these. The meaning behind his master's words was clear as day. He only wanted Su Ming to experience the process of hunting a shaman. He did not ask him to be successful in it. His only demand for Su Ming was that final sentence: 3 days. Within 3 days, he must go back. When half of the second day went past, Su Ming had already entered the deep parts of the forest. It might have been noon by then, but it was difficult for sunlight to break through the layers of leaves in the forest. The ground was filled with mud and it was letting out a rotten stench. Su Ming continued moving before he came to a sudden halt. In the forest before him, he saw a small hill. That hill was not tall and was filled with plants, and Su Ming saw a person at the top of the hill. That person was crouching down on the mountain, his hideous face filled drearinish. He was staring at Su Ming. Their gazes met and clashed with each other. Su Ming felt his mind go blank, but his divine senses were instantly activated and he regained his senses. As for the man on the small hill, a grave expression appeared in his tired eyes and his body swayed. With the momentum provided by that sway, he rushed down the back of the hill. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes and he charged towards the small hill. When he stood at the top of the mountain, the first thing that entered his vision was the man lifting his hands and pressing them against his chest at the hillside. He coughed out a large mouthful of black blood, and that black blood churned as it floated in midair before turning into black arrows that sliced through the air towards him. Su Ming could tell that this person had already spent all of his strength, and he had also noticed him as Su Ming was chasing him down. That was why he could not heal his injuries. Now that he chose to attack, he was revealing the extent of his injuries. With a cold snort, Su Ming took a step forward and did not even bother to dodge the arrows coming his way. With his speed, he could simply ignore them. As he moved forward, green light flashed at the center of his brows. The sword mark flickered and the sword was about to fly out, but at that moment Su Ming's expression suddenly changed. His legs were moving down the HLL, but the moment he started moving down, he immediately noticed there was something off about the slope. The man lifted his head swiftly and a tinge of cruelness appeared on his lips. He charged towards Su Ming with a single leap, and he moved so quickly that Su Ming could barely keep track of him with his naked eye. If the man had been preparing for this burst of shocking speed since a long time ago, then Su Ming would have definitely not been able to catch up. Just as the man's speed suddenly increased, Su Ming also felt that his tempo as he went down the mountain suddenly decreased in a manner that completely went against all that he understood. It was as if he had just exchanged places with this man and that he was going up the hill while the other person was going down. That was why this difference in speed appeared, even though this was clearly not the case. All of this only lasted for an instant. The man's arrows closed in on Su Ming. Although he avoided them, the moment he did so, the man closed in on him with that shocking speed of his. A sense of life-threatening danger immediately rose within Su Ming's body like a tidal wave. The hairs on his body rose. His body felt as if it was stuck on the mountain. Even if he wanted to fly, his greatly reduced speed and the man's shocking speed would not let him avoid the man's clearly prepared killing move. It had been a long time since Su Ming last felt as if his life was being threatened. Now that it happened once again, it allowed the emotions in his eyes to quiet down in an instant, and a calm that was akin to still water in an ancient spread through him. His first act was to let his entire body be surrounded by black fog. A black armor that seethed with a murderous aura appeared on his descending body. It was his divine general armor. The instant the armor appeared, Su Ming's second act was not to bring out Han Mountain Bell to defend himself. Instead, he activated the power of his divine sense. His body might have slowed down, but with his divine sense, he could still see the trajectory of his incoming opponent's line of attack. He saw the man lifting his right hand as he was quickly closing in on him and his fingernails turning into sharp claws that were surrounded by black mist. They went straight for his chest and would arrive in an instant. When he saw all of this clearly, Su Ming moved to the side slightly. A loud bang rang through the air and he jolted. Unable to withstand the attack, his divine general armor started shattering. Yet even though it was shattering, it recovered within an instant, and this continued multiple times until the armor completely cancelled out the man's attack. However, sharp pain that came from the jolts shot through Su Ming's entire body because his divine general armor was just an illusion and did not have physical form. Su Ming had not yet gone to the Great Yu dynasty to retrieve his true armor. That was why while the armor could resist the power of the five-fingered claw, it could not withstand the shell knife that was formed after the 5 fingernails gathered together once the man brought all 5 of his fingers together. That was a black shell that was about the size of a knife. If anyone took a closer look, they would see that it was tortoise shell, but if that shell was taken apart, it could be stored within the man's fingers. They looked like fingernails, but if they were gathered together, then its real form would appear. That shell knife pierced through Su Ming's divine general armor and stabbed right into his chest. The knife's target was originally Su Ming's heart, but due to Su Ming moving his body slightly once he activated his divine sense, the knife missed his heart. It might hurt immensely, but at least he was not heavily wounded. All this happened in an instant. Once the shell knife in the man's hand pierced through Su Ming's right side of the chest, a stunned expression appeared on his face. Clearly, he did not expect that Su Ming could still avoid the attack when his speed had decreased while the man's speed increased. He was also shocked by the fact that Su Ming was one of the divine generals in the Berserker tribe, and his desire to kill him grew stronger. His shock quickly turned into a cold sneer. Just as the man was about to pull out his shell knife, he saw Su Ming lift his head and a monstrous killing aura appear within his eyes. That was not all. He also saw a brilliant red hue in Su Ming's right eye that made it clearly different from his left eye. That enchanting brilliant red made his eye seem like a moon that was dyed in blood. When the man saw it at such close proximity, for some unknown reason, he was horrified. This knife is pretty good. I'll be taking it. Su Ming spoke in a hoarse voice and grabbed the shell knife that had stabbed into his chest with his left hand with such a tight grip that the man could not pull it out. At the same time, a bell chime spread out from within Su Ming's body. That bell chime boomed and reverberated in the air, causing layers of ripples to form around Su Ming and the man. The bell chimes were filled with a sense of graveness, but when they fell into the man's ears, they sounded like the heavens themselves were howling in anger, and those howls turned into thunderous roars. It caused his body to shudder, and even if he had used the mysterious power residing within the hill to increase his own speed, he could not help but flinch. The moment he flinched, with the shocking murderous aura spilling out from the red in his right eye, Su Ming crashed his head against the man's head before him. A bang rang in the air, and it was followed by the man's shrill and pained screams. He wanted to move away, but Su Ming's right hand had already flown up to grab the man's shoulder. He lifted his head, took a step forward, and pushed the man's body before he crashed his head against the man's again. He was forced back a dozen steps and his head suffered a similar amount of pain. The man's face was covered in blood and horror appeared in his eyes. He was already running on empty, and the amount of power he could use was only about the level of a berserker in the middle stage of the awakening realm. If he had calmed and used the unique divine abilities of the shaman tribe, then he might have had a chance to escape. However, he was first intimidated by Xianxia, then witnessed his lover killed before his eyes. As split dawns, once their other half died, then it would be very difficult for them to be of any threat to their enemies. The split dawns may be powerful, but their weaknesses were similarly great. He originally wanted to kill Su Ming to take revenge while mid-escape, but he did not expect him to be so vicious. That blood-red light in his right eye especially made terror flood the man's heart. In the midst of his terror, he saw green light flash at the center of Su Ming's brows, and since they were so close to each other, the small virescent sword swept through the man's neck with just one slight move. Blood gushed out and his head fell to the ground. Due to the strangeness of the hill, the gushing blood and blood on the ground did not flow down the hill, but flowed up as Su Ming let go of the man's hand. His corpse fell to the ground and Su Ming caught the man's head by its hair. Su Ming's face was pale and his breathing rapid. The shell knife remained buried deep in the right side of his chest. Su Ming took a deep breath and was just about to leave the hill when he suddenly turned his head to look at the forest not too far away from him. He saw a boy there. He was dressed in beast skins and his face was deathly pale as he stared at Su Ming with a stunned expression. There was a crude-looking bow in his hands. Su Ming saw the tattoos that belonged to the shamans on his face. This was a child of the shaman tribe. Su Ming cast a glance at the boy in silence, then pressed a hand against his chest, turned around, and quickly walked down the hill. Chapter 262. Boy. The sky in the land of the shamans was vast. At a place not too far from sky mist barrier that could be considered to be at the borders of the land of the shamans was a bloody stench that filled the entire land. Even if wind swept past the land, it still could not get rid of the bloody stench from the land. A golden bird that was about 10,000 feet in size floated in the sky. There were hundreds of ferocious beasts prostrating themselves before it, unmoving, as if they were waiting for the golden rock's orders. The golden rock had its eyes closed. There was an old man who also had his eyes closed sitting on its back. His purple robes looked like dried up blood as they swayed in the wind. Xianxia had already sat in the spot for 1.5 days. He would wait for another 1.5 days for his fourth disciple, for Su Ming to return. This was a test. It was also his first ever test to Su Ming. No matter whether you succeed in going through your first change in heart, you will still be my disciple. As long as you are alive, then you will still have chances to go through other changes in heart. But Sky Mist Shaman Hunt usually ends with a person going in alive and coming out dead. Xianxia mumbled and opened his eyes. I won't worry about your change in heart. I might not know what sort of past you have, but I am confident that you will succeed in going through your first change in heart. You should have found peace in your heart once you saw him creating Zun. What I'm worried is that while you are vicious, you don't have any sense of belonging to the land of South Morning and don't have enough understanding of our hate towards the shamans, and because of that, you will have a moment of weakness. There was no longer any brutality within Xianxia's eyes, only calm. He looked at the distance silently. If anyone followed Xianxia's gaze that seemed to be looking forward endlessly, they would find a small hill in a forest that seemed to span endlessly in a place that could only be reached if they traveled for a day and a half. Su Ming stood on the small hill and did not turn his head back to look at the boy standing not too far from the foot of the mountain. The kid looked like someone who could fit right into his tribe, and if he was there, his power would be around the 2nd or 3rd level of the blood solidification realm. He might be from the shaman tribe, but Su Ming could not bring himself to kill him. Sharp pain spread out from Su Ming's chest as he continued remaining in silence. Blood flowed out from his wound. The shell knife had still brought harm to him. If he had not avoided the attack, that knife would have stabbed his heart. He pulled out the shell knife, and at the same time Su Ming left the small hill, he lifted his left hand and pointed towards the pale boy who had just snapped out of his terror and had turned around to run back quickly. A gust of wind sliced through the air and closed in on the running boy in an instant. The moment it fell on him, the gust of wind suddenly split into two parts. One crashed into the big tree by the boy's side, and a green, poisonous snake that had charged out without the boy's knowledge fell to the ground once its head exploded. The other gust of wind crashed into the boy. He shuddered and fell to the ground unconscious. Only those who had mastered awakening fine control could make the wind form from the fingers split into two, and Su Ming's fine control had already arrived at an incredibly precise state. "I won't kill you, but only if you don't go back and reveal my whereabouts." Su Ming left the small hill and went back by the same path he'd taken forward. He had already used more than a day's time for this chase. Now that it had ended, he did not stop to rest, but instead used the quickest speed to run so that he could get back within the 3 days, in the time limit his master had given him. Su Ming was extremely careful as he traveled through this unfamiliar land that belonged to the shamans and was filled with all sorts of dangers. He knew that he should have killed the boy, but he just chose to make him unconscious. After the time it takes to burn half an incense stick after Su Ming left, the boy's body suddenly jolted. A mysterious energy had appeared out of nowhere and made the boy wake up beforehand. The boy opened his eyes and first examined his body. Once he learned that he was uninjured, he saw the poisonous snake that had lost its head by his side, and he was momentarily stunned. Yet it only lasted for a brief moment before it disappeared quickly. There was no longer any hint of shock on the boy's young face when he looked at the small hill. All traces of it were replaced by ruthlessness and hatred. He got up and ran back to where his tribe was at full speed. He did not stop as he ran, and as he did so, he bit his tongue and coughed out a mouthful of blood, then closed his eyes. When he reopened them soon after, that blood of his had turned into a small blood-red bird. The bird flapped its wings and charged into the distance at shocking speed before disappearing without a trace. In a place that was not too far away, a village could be found on a spot where the forest was cleared. The mud on the ground was filled with sand so that it was firm. There was also a large plot of land in the distance that was planted with vegetables. Laughter could be heard from the village. Men belonging to the shaman tribe with tattoo-filled faces could be seen occasionally roaming the village with wary expressions on their faces. Yet when an hour later they saw the red bird that suddenly flew out of the forest, their expressions immediately changed. That small red bird flew into the village and straight away went into one of the houses in the village. There was an old man sitting within the house. The old man was half naked and only had a beast skin wrapped around his waist. There was a small cauldron before him and it was burning with some herbs. Wisps of smoke seeped out of the cauldron and were sucked into the old man's eyes, ears, nose, and mouth as he breathed in, before coming out of his pores, enveloping him in a hazy, distorted aura. There were 2 beautiful girls from the shaman tribe behind him. They knelt by his side and fanned him gently with fans made of big leaves. The breeze was very light and could not blow away the wisps of smoke. The entire house was silent. Yet the moment the small red bird broke in, the old man suddenly opened his eyes, and within one of his eyes, 4 pupils could be seen. The small red bird closed in and landed before him the moment the old man opened his eyes. With a bang, it turned into a layer of blood fog, and as the old man inhaled, the fog was taken into the old man's eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. Once he did so, the light within his eyes immediately flickered as if pictures had just appeared out of nowhere before his eyes, allowing him to see everything clearly. A berserker, a cruel and bloodthirsty smile appeared on the old man's face, and he licked his lips. If any berserker saw his tongue, they would definitely be taken aback, because the length of the old man's tongue had clearly exceeded the normal length of a human's tongue. It looked like that of a snake, and it seemed as if the old man wanted to, he could lick his own hair. With that bloodthirsty and cruel smile on his lips, the old man stood up, and once he walked out of his house, he spread out his arms and let out a low growl. Once he growled, the entire tribe instantly fell silent. All the people turned their gazes towards the old man. "Can you smell it?" The old man's voice was hoarse, ghastly. "This is the smell belonging to a berserker. This smell is the sweet smell of a berserker's blood. A berserker has entered the forest where our lizard god lives. He has walked on our land and killed a warrior of the shaman tribe. He has disturbed the lizard god within the forest. Kill him. Take his head and hang it outside our tribe. Dig out his heart and squeeze the blood out. His blood will be drunk by the powerful shamans of our tribe. Kill him, and pull out his teeth so that we can hang them off our necks as trophies." A short period of silence fell among the people before the entire tribe erupted in a maddening roar. That roar came from all the shamans within the tribe, and ruthless looks could even be seen on some of the children, women, and the elderly. The old man took a step forward and turned into a long arc as he charged out of his tribe. Around 20 other people followed behind him, charging swiftly into the forest beyond the village. Once they left the village, they split into 2 teams. The old man led a few men and flew into the sky. As for the rest, they started searching for clues within the forest with the skills passed down by their ancestors. Su Ming was running through the forest at an extremely quick speed, not bothering to stop and take breaks. His chest was no longer bleeding, but the pain only became stronger as he continued with his mad dash. He did consider flying, but that thought was immediately scrapped off. If he flew for a day and a half, then he might run into shamans. To him, who was currently in the unfamiliar land, this act was one of foolishness. Compared to the sky, the forest was more suitable for Su Ming to traverse. Time trickled by as he continued running. When the second night arrived, he sat down cross-legged on a big tree and regulated his breathing. Judging from the distance, I'll reach my master's side by tomorrow night. Su Ming touched his chest and a blood-red hue appeared in his right eye. It had been a long while since he had suffered such a grievous injury. His trip to the shaman tribe this time allowed him to see the mysteriousness surrounding the shaman tribe. This would prove extremely useful to him during the Sky Mist shaman hunt a few months later, because the experience he obtained from hunting the shaman alone in their land was not an experience everyone could have. As he breathed in the air of the forest that belonged to the shamans, Su Ming felt as if the oppressive feeling pressing against his heart started to fade away. I didn't expect Master to have the shaman's sacred beast. I may not know what a sacred beast is, but with just one roar, he made the spirit medium crumble and killed one of the split dawns, while heavily injuring the other, and all the other shamans around the area died. This power. Su Ming sucked in a deep breath. He just remembered that he had seen a sacred beast like this before. In his memories, he saw clouds tumble about in the sky like black fog, and it spread out to cover an area that was about thousands of leagues. Within that fog was a gigantic mackerel pike. There was a girl standing on the mackerel pike. Uncle Master Bai could actually fight against a sacred beast. Su Ming was stunned. As he saw and experienced more things, he gained a new understanding towards Uncle Master Bai's strength. Just as Su Ming was pondering over his master and Uncle Master Bai and was shocked by the might of the shaman tribe's sacred beasts, his eyes suddenly gained a serious look and the blood-red light in his right eye shone. His entire body tensed up like a strung bow and he leapt out of the big tree he sat on in an instant. He could clearly sense a dozen shamans within an area of 3,000 feet around him with his divine senses. Those shamans were charging towards him with vicious cruelty and with an eager thirst for blood in a manner as if they were trying to surround him. The first sight that entered his mind at that moment he sensed those shamans was the boy he had knocked unconscious with the wind he'd summoned from his fingers. Chapter 263. His strongest attack. Su Ming fell silent. With one leap, he quietly went towards the male shaman that was the closest to him in the area he could sense with his divine sense. A serious expression settled on his face and blood-red light shone in his right eye, filled with a murderous aura. The moment he closed in on the cruel-looking man, that murderous aura erupted all at once from within him. That man immediately stopped and slammed his lifted hands onto his face. That strange sight made Su Ming's pupils shrink. The very moment the man's hand struck his face and he coughed out a large mouthful of blood, a dozen teeth broke off in his mouth and spilled out with the blood. They turned into a dozen sharp thorns that charged towards Su Ming at shocking speed. Su Ming had never seen such a skill before, and he was just about to dodge it when those thorns changed direction and followed him closely as if they possessed a high amount of intelligence. What an incredible shamanic divine ability! Su Ming knew that it was impossible for him to kill the man before him quietly now. Green light shone on the center of his brows and the small virescent sword charged out swiftly before clashing against the dozen thorns with a loud bang. As the bang echoed in the air, those thorns shattered, and the small virescent sword charged towards the retreating male shaman, penetrating through his forehead. His pained cries before his death fused together with a bang and broke the silence in the forest at night. It was like a stone had been thrown suddenly into a well with only still water, and it caused a large amount of ripples to appear on the water's surface. Right when the scream rang out, Su Ming noticed the remaining shamans in the area of his divine sense immediately changing direction and charging towards where he was. There was now only around 2,000 feet between them. Su Ming knew that he could not escape from being surrounded and decided to charge towards one of the shamans. He dashed forward at an extremely fast pace, and as green light shone beside him, a bang resounded in the sky. A corpse without his head fell down before Su Ming. Right then, there was only 1,500 feet between the remaining people and Su Ming. He lifted his head and lightning swam through his entire body. Right at the instant crackling sounds reverberated in the air, a ball of lightning surrounded him. It spread outwards, and the sky and earth rumbled. If anyone was to look from above, they would see that the land had turned into a pool of lightning, and Su Ming stood in its center. The swimming lightning spread outwards at a frenzied pace, and as lightning traveled through the land, mud would shatter, trees would wither, grass would turn into dust, and most of the people who were about 1,000 feet away from him shuddered. However, 2 of these dozen people could not be held back. Their bodies faltered only for a moment before they charged towards Su Ming. Right when these 2 people closed in and appeared within Su Ming's sight, bell chimes reverberated from within him. Those rumbling bell chimes turned into sound waves that crashed into the incoming duo. They forced one of them to slow down, but there was still one who did not slow down in the slightest and closed in on Su Ming. That person was a middle-aged man with a long scar left behind by a knife on his face. That scar caused the tattoo on his face to look as if it was split in half. There may have been ruthlessness reflecting off the light in his eyes, but under that ruthlessness was calmness. This person's power would be equivalent to a berserker between the later stage to the peak of the awakening realm, and he was only 1 step away from reaching the bone sacrifice realm. If Su Ming had been at full health, he could fight against this man and win. However, Su Ming was injured, and his knowledge regarding shamanic spells was terribly limited. That was why if he fought against him, he would not be able to end the fight quickly. Once the fight was dragged out, then the chance he created with lightning and the bell chimes would be wasted. Once it was wasted and the people around him recovered, they would surround him. If Su Ming wanted to break through, he would have to pay a big price to succeed. Besides, Su Ming had no doubt that there were other shamans who had sealed off his path in the sky. If he dragged this out even further, then there would be more shamans who would arrive on land as well. Once a shaman who was equivalent to a berserker at the bone sacrifice realm arrived, then Su Ming would not be able to fight back. In the face of danger, calm surfaced in Su Ming's eyes. However, that calmness was almost akin to aloofness. The enchanting blood-red glow in his right eye flickered, and right at the moment the middle-aged shaman closed in, Su Ming lifted his right hand, and an ice piece appeared on his palm. Within that ice was fire. Right when Su Ming crushed that ice, a sea of fire spread out furiously from higher hand. However, that sea of fire was not hot. It spread out with a freezing chill. This ice was naturally the gift Su Ming's eldest senior brother had given him. That middle-aged shaman's face instantly changed and many scales immediately appeared on his skin. By the looks of it, this person was rapidly changing from a human to some sort of ferocious beast. However, the speed of his change could not catch up to the fire in the ice Su Ming had summoned. The fire exploded forth like a monstrous big mouth and swallowed the incoming middle-aged man. At the same time, the chill that was just spreading out a moment ago swiftly gathered around the middle-aged man. Cracking sounds that made Su Ming suck in a sharp breath rang through the air, and a scene of icy fire that shocked even Su Ming appeared before his eyes. The middle-aged man, caught in between the state of being human and beast, was sealed inside a large block of ice. His horrified expression was filled with disbelief. Su Ming saw a ball of fire within his body. That fire did not seem to be burning, but Su Ming saw that frozen man's body turn black, and within the ice, he turned into a mass of black ash. All of this happened in an instant. The power of that ice let Su Ming gain a new understanding towards his eldest senior brother's power. However, this was not the time for him to think too deeply into it. With one leap, he charged towards the shaman who was forced to stop due to Han Mountain Bell. That person was not a man but a woman. The woman was already in the middle stage of her life and had an ordinary face. The tattoo on her face flickered, and she had an equally vicious look on her face as the man had. However, when she saw Su Ming making one of the incredibly powerful shamans in her tribe die in such a bizarre fashion, that viciousness turned into shock. She was about to move back, but another bell chime rang through the air instantly, causing her mind to ring and her body to stop once again. This would also be the last time her body stopped moving like this ever again. In the span of a breath, Su Ming went past the woman like lightning, and once he did so, he brought with him a head gushing with blood. The woman's body fell to the ground twitching. The moment her corpse fell to the ground, Su Ming panted harshly. His face was pale and the wound on his chest worsened. In the short amount of time, he had killed multiple people. Although he had killed the most powerful person among these people with his eldest senior brother's gift, the high-speed movement exhausted his injured body. Nonetheless, he did not stop. As the murderous aura in his right eye flickered, he charged towards the remaining people who were frozen from lightning continuing to swim around him. Moonlight from the sky gathered behind Su Ming and formed a moonlight cloak reminiscent of the time when he was in Dark Mountain. As it floated behind him, the light turned into countless threads that danced behind Su Ming as he moved. He went past all the shamans who were stunned by his lightning, and their heads flew into the sky. Green light shone, and the small virescent sword let out piercing sword whistles as it was dyed in blood. When Su Ming closed in on the final person, he waved his hand, and the moonlight threads behind him swarmed forward, wrapping up the shaman swiftly, then right away they tore through him. The final shaman of those that had surrounded Su Ming in the forest let out a piercing scream before his body was ripped into shreds. Blood gushed into the air. However, the battle was far from finished. Su Ming did not even have time to calm his ragged breathing. Almost at the instant after the final shaman was slaughtered by the moonlight threads, a furious roar came from the sky. "How dare you, Berserker!" The voice was like thunder, and shook Su Ming. He lifted his head and saw 8 people coming from the sky. Among these 7 to 8 people was an old man. He was as thin as bones, but there was a mighty presence coming from him, and that presence made an incredibly grave expression appear on Su Ming's face. The old man was not the one who spoke. Those words came instead from a man standing among the 8 people. That man's power was at about the same level as the strongest shaman Su Ming had killed just now. There was something else that made Su Ming's pupils shrink. Besides the old man, all the people in the sky stood on ferocious beasts that looked like ligers, and all of them were roaring at him. The old man did not move, but the remaining 7 people all charged towards Su Ming. The ruthlessness in their eyes, their thirst for blood, and the mighty presences made the exhausted Su Ming feel as if he was caught between life and death. Su Ming hadn't expected that the results of that one merciful act could be so terrible. He had clearly saved the boy's life before he had knocked him out. He had clearly killed that poisonous snake. Su Ming closed his eyes. He knew that he might have made a mistake. "Perhaps I really made a mistake," as Su Ming mumbled under his breath. He sat down cross-legged and lifted his right hand. In the face of death, right at the instant the 7 people from the sky came charging towards him roaring, his mind became empty. There was no terror, no regret. He even forgot about life and death itself. The only thing in his heart was the one strike that had become his own after the tens of thousands of strokes he had practiced. He lifted his hand and closed his eyes, then sliced at the sky with a gentle swipe of his fingers. That single slice caused the weather to change. It was as if some seal was broken, but it was also different from the time he had competed against Qian Lan Meng in the 7th summit. Even if Sai Martian bore witness to that single slice right then, he would also find it difficult to find any sort of similarities between this attack and the first style of the god of Berserker's transformation. This one slice was Su Ming's strongest attack. The instant he drew that line, the aloof old man in the sky suddenly changed his expression and waved his arm. Wisps of smoke immediately spread from his body and turned into a gigantic lizard formed from smoke. It stuck out its tongue at Su Ming. Its tongue charged towards him and crashed into the line he had drawn. Chapter 264. 3 methods that one stroke was Su Ming's strongest attack from all the divine abilities he had learned. That one stroke came to being after he copied the first style from Sai Martian's god of Berserker's transformation and drew it repeatedly day and night with a clear mind, allowing this one line to contain his own creation. That one line was no longer Sai Martian's sword slash, Neither was it that stroke he had used that day when he competed against Qian Lan Meng. It was instead a combination of his life up to this point, all the difficulties he had went through in the land of South Morning, his memories in Dark Mountain, and once all these things combined together into this one line, this one stroke became creation itself. This line that Su Ming drew couldn't be found in the world before this. This line seemed to have been born out of nothing, and because of this, it became Su Ming's first ever creation. With that one line towards the sky, the weather changed, but the wind and clouds remained still. As that line sliced through the air, the tongue from the lizard that was formed from the old shaman through the smoke that came out of his pores clashed into it. A piercing cry and thunderous bang suddenly reverberated through the forest and the entire land of the shamans. It was as if the sounds had pierced through the sky itself and spread in all directions. The tongue from the gigantic smoke lizard shattered instantly, destroyed by the one line Su Ming had created with his fingers in the world. Things were far from their end though. The moment the lizard's tongue exploded, the expressions on the 7 shamans who had pounced onto Su Ming changed. A light flashed briefly in their eyes, but that light did not come from within them. It was instead a reflection of the light caused by the line Su Ming had drawn. And the instant the light shone, these 7 people started trembling, and the person standing right at the front exploded, turning into a layer of blood fog that scattered in the air. Vicious trembles wrecked the 2 people behind that man, and their right arms and right legs were separated from their bodies as if they had been cut off by a sword. Screaming in pain, they fell back. As for the person behind them, a terrifying long mark had appeared on his chest. It was as if his chest had turned into a drawing board and that one line from Su Ming fell on his chest. He coughed out a large mouthful of blood and his face turned deathly pale. Horrified surprise appeared on his face. The 4th person behind the man who exploded was a man in his 20s. He was handsome and did not have a lot of tattoos on his face. However, there was now a line of blood tearing apart his face, stretching from his forehead right up to the right side of his chest. Blood flowed from the corner of his lips and he staggered back a few steps before he finally managed to stop. The beast skins on the upper body of the 5th person disappeared like ashes in the wind. There was a faint bloody line where his heart was, but even though it was faint, it had still cut through his skin and made blood flow from that wound. The 6th person's clothes were also torn apart, but there was no wound on his chest. Nonetheless, his face had gained a deathly pale hue. The final person was completely uninjured, but he was also the one who was shaking the hardest. He had just witnessed one of his comrades killed, 2 mutilated, another one heavily wounded, while the rest of them sustained various degrees of injuries. The source of it all was the berserker before them, who had done all this with a seemingly effortless slash from his right hand. That one slash captured his soul and stunned his heart. As this person fell into a state of shock, a feeling that he could not fight against Su Ming rose uncontrollably in his heart. He was not the only one who felt this way. The other people beside him were the same. When Su Ming drew that line, he had his eyes closed and executed that attack in what seemed to be an effortless manner. It was as if he had just created a picture in the world with a wave of his hand. They were not just wounded in their bodies, their courage had also taken a heavy blow, including their hearts. They became afraid, frightened. To Su Ming, he had limited experience fighting against the shamans, but similarly, there were also a lot of shamans who did not have much experience fighting against berserkers. While Su Ming thought that the shaman spells were strange and unpredictable, at the same time, the shamans also felt that Su Ming's divine abilities were not just strange, but also filled with a power that they could not understand, and it horrified them. It was just like how no one knew why lightning would appear in the sky, like how they did not understand why rain fell from the sky instead of rising from the land. There might be some people who understood those things, but most of the people in the shaman tribe, they did not. Similarly, Su Ming's line was something they did not understand. In their eyes, this was not a divine ability or an art. They could not understand just how power that could even shock the sky and move the earth be contained in that one stroke which he drew when he lifted his hand. They also did not know that this one line was rarely found within the land of the berserkers, because this was indeed not an art. It was creation. This was Su Ming's world picture creation. This could be said to be the first time Su Ming truly let loose and revealed the complete form of his creation. It was just like his eldest senior brother's sound of creation and like his second senior brother's hands of creation. Right then, Su Ming was showing off his pictures of creation. With the sky as the board and the people as paper, he drew one line through 7 people. It was as if he had just drawn on rice paper with ink. That one line contained such powerful permeating abilities that it spread through several papers. The first paper contained the biggest stain, and the power of that line was continuously weakened until it eventually faded away when it reached the final paper. Su Ming opened his eyes and coughed out blood. The moment he did so, he gained an epiphany. Before this, he had only a fuzzy understanding towards the meaning of creation. There were also things he did not understand about the creation arts that the other berserkers casted. Xianxia was a good master, but at the same time, he was also a terrible master. There were many things that he did not tell his disciples, leaving them to understand it on their own. Once they gained complete comprehension towards the word, they would understand it. At that instant, Su Ming understood what was meant by creation. Accurately speaking, that one line he drew just now could only be considered as one creation. However, even though it was just one creation, he had still truly created something. It may seem the same as Sima Xin's 10 creations or even any other 100 creations, but it was in reality completely different. When Su Ming could draw 10 such lines containing his strongest power, every single stroke containing the power of the world but being completely different from each other, then once he drew those 10 lines, it would be known as 10 creations. If he drew 100 of such lines, then it would be known as 100 creations. If he drew 1,000 lines, then it would be known as eternal creation. If Su Ming could draw something incredibly and unimaginable at his 1,000th line, then he could step up his game and draw 10,000 lines. If they still contained a different form and a different spirit in each and every single one of them, then this final line would be known as the eternal creation that only belonged to the god of berserkers. This one line of his was different from the tens of thousands of lines he drew when he competed against Qian Lan Meng. The tens of thousands of lines that eventually gathered together and developed into his final and complete one line was what was required by the eternal creation art. It was a line that could only be formed by integrating at least 10,000 different lines together. Su Ming understood now. Yet at the moment he understood this, he also realized that an incredibly powerful change had happened in his heart. That change was the chaos that appeared in his heart. 2 different girls appeared in his mind due to that one line he drew just now. One of the 2 girls was the white-robed by Ling standing in the snow, and the other was the purple-robed by Su who was looking at him with scorn, her head lifted in determination. These 2 different people had the same face and the same wild beauty. Change of heart. Su Ming had heard this phrase multiple times from Xianxia. He also knew that he was going through his first change of heart, but in reality, he had no idea what this change of heart was. Xianxia did not explain in detail either. He still continued with his usual method of teaching and left his disciples to understand it on their own. When Su Ming drew that line, it was as if his heart and spirit had fused into that line. As the line became connected with the world, his emotions surged out as if a dam had been broken. Once they were completely let out, his heart and spirit became empty. During that instant his mind became blank. He understood the meaning behind creation, and it was also because of the emptiness in his mind that he understood what change of heart meant when the 2 girls appeared in his heart. A person's emotions and desires were one of the sources that affected a person's life. They would make a person be unable to clear his mind and cause disorder within him. When that disorder appeared and the person did not deal with it properly, then it would be difficult for him to continue with his practice. If his heart was no longer calm, then it was impossible for him to immerse his mind in anything else. This was what was meant by change of heart. At that moment, the person must think of a way to remain in a tranquil state. One of the methods to do so was to fight. That person must fight against the source of that change of heart, thereby using the battle as proof. Just like when Xianxia brought Su Ming to fight against his 7th junior brother. The second method was to destroy. That person must destroy the source of the change of heart. Just like how the purple robes would not disappear without 1,000 drops of blood from the hearts of shamans. The third method was to forget. Once he forgot the source of the change of heart, then it would be gone. It was just like the sentence Xianxia had told Su Ming once he brought him to see the old Sun Maker. He is blind. Did you manage to see it? It did not matter whether the old man was blind or not. The meaning of the sentence itself was a form of telling him to forget, just like how Su Ming forgot to realize that the old man was blind. At that moment, Su Ming understood the meaning behind the change of heart, and he also understood his master's love for him. He did not tell Su Ming what a change of heart was through his words or expressions, but through his actions, and not just that, he also told him how to deal with those changes of heart. Even more so, he understood why his master told him to chase down that male split dawn. Perhaps in master's mind, there's another meaning for him to do this besides telling me about the cruelty of the shamans at that moment. Su Ming could tell just what Xianxia had not said to him at that time. Battle, destroy. Forget master's choice for me is to destroy my change of heart. Destroy the source of the change of heart by killing Bai Su. He could remove this change of heart within him. Without Bai Su, Su Ming's memories of Bai Ling in his heart would not be pulled out, and her shadow would not be left to affect his heart, which would in turn cause him to be unable to calm his mind. If he could not, then he must forget. He must forget everything to get through this change of heart. If he could not, then he must fight, be it against Sai Ma Xin or anyone else, then use that battle to find proof for his heart. This was the road Xianxia pointed out for Su Ming. The moment Su Ming understood everything, more questions arose within him. If a person is unfeeling and merciless, has no emotions and desires, then would he not experience changes of the heart? All these thoughts appeared within Su Ming's head once he gained his epiphany when he opened his eyes after he finished drawing that line. It might have seemed slow, but in truth, it only lasted for the duration of his right hand drawing the line across the sky. As blood flowed from the corners of his lips, Su Ming's body swayed, tumbled backwards, and he ran into the deeper parts of the forest. His strongest attack could allow him to battle against those 7 people, but he knew that he could not fight against the old man in the sky looking at him darkly. He could only use the shock brought to the shamans after he drew that one line and turn it into a chance to escape. Chapter 265, Life and Death Chase. Su Ming could not see through the old man's power, but he gave him a feeling that he was extremely dangerous. In fact, when Su Ming had executed his strongest slash, instead of acting on his own, he had used a divine ability that Su Ming did not understand and gathered up smoke to create that giant lizard. The slash might only have touched the lizard's tongue and caused it to crumble, but it also made Su Ming's strongest attack only kill one person. More importantly, Su Ming had a strange feeling that besides using the smoke lizard's tongue to counter his slash and reduce its power, there was another meaning as to why he had summoned the creature. That feeling was deeply rooted within Su Ming's mind. He had guessed that when his slash crashed into that tongue, countless pairs of invisible eyes appeared in the air and were all watching closely for the fine details when he drew that line. It was as if they were learning it. That feeling turned into a sense of danger that made Su Ming run without hesitation. In the blink of an eye, he charged into the forest. Su Ming knew that if he fought here and used all the attacks he had to keep that old man busy, due to the existence of other shamans in this place, it would be difficult for him to survive the battle. Instead of doing so, he would rather use the chance to escape. As he led them to chase after him, perhaps he could find a chance to counterattack. Once Su Ming left, the remaining 6 people who had not died in the air turned towards their leader, their supreme patriarch. The old man's face was dark and he slowly closed his eyes. After a moment, he opened them once again, and right at the instant he did so, the gigantic lizard that had lost its tongue and was now floating behind him immediately lifted its head and howled towards the sky. As it howled, wisps of smoke appeared out of thin air around it. Most of them came from the place where its tongue had crashed into Su Ming's slash just now. They gathered up and seeped into the gigantic lizard's body, and soon, the shattered tongue appeared once again in the lizard's mouth. The moment its tongue appeared, the lizard stuck it out and drew out an arc at lightning speed. If Su Ming was there, he would recognize that the arc was incredibly familiar to the one line he had drawn previously. However, it was simply similar to it. I didn't expect that the berserker who entered our land this time would have gained such an epiphany. That one style I saw just now was incredibly different from what I saw in other berserkers. I will capture this berserker personally. I'll capture him alive and turn him into a shaman puppet. He will become the servant of our tribe's sacred spirit. As the old man spoke, another 2 pupils appeared in both of his eyes. It made him look bizarre, and at the same time, all those who looked at him would feel dazzled and not dare to look him in the eye. A cruel smile appeared on his lips, as if this sort of chase excited him. With one leap, he charged into the forest, towards where Su Ming ran. The people on the land looked at each other, and in their silence, they saw respect within the eyes of their comrades towards what had happened just now. After a long while, these people turned into long arcs and flew back to their tribe, supporting the wounded. Su Ming's breathing was ragged as he ran. His body was like an illusion as he dashed through the forest filled with rotten leaves and mud. Sometimes he would leap up and jump from tree to tree. His feet would almost never touch the ground. It was as if he was flying at low altitude, and he was traveling so quickly it was difficult for anyone to catch him with the naked eye. Su Ming was not unfamiliar with the forest. Yet as he continued running, the apprehension he felt became stronger. He did not even need to cast out his divine sense to know that there was someone chasing after him. I wonder how many people came. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes and a golden stone coin appeared in his hands. He hesitated for a moment before he changed it to a white stone coin. The stone coin quickly grew dull once he held it in his hands and turned into ashes after a moment. However, the area Su Ming could see with his divine sense increased by several fold, and as his head throbbed in pain, he directed that area behind him. 1,000 feet, 10,000 feet, several tens of thousands of feet he swept through the area with his divine sense as far as he could. After the time taken for an incense stick to burn, Su Ming's pupils shrank. Once the area he could expand with his divine sense reached its limit, he used a few more stone coins, and only then did he see a ghastly figure chasing after him from far behind him. His alone, all of Su Ming's hair stood up on end and a wary look appeared on his face. He saw that the person chasing after him was that old man, and his familiarity with the forest far exceeded his own. This, however, was nothing. What really made Su Ming's heart sink was that the tracking skills he used were also incredibly difficult to understand. As Su Ming was running away, he created several signs to throw his opponent off, but the old man did not change his direction at all. He merely continued with his pursuit. This not only made the sense of danger Su Ming felt become stronger, it also made him clearly sense the person's power once he swept through the area when his divine senses were stretched to the limit. This person's power must be equivalent to the bone sacrifice realm, and by the looks of it, he's not any ordinary bone sacrifice realm shaman either. He might be in the later stage of the bone sacrifice realm. But when I used my divine sense to scan the area, he didn't notice me. I wonder if that's true, or he's doing it intentionally. Su Ming was yet to reach the bone sacrifice realm and it was difficult for him to be certain. He could only guess, and even though he had been prepared for this, his heart still sank. Tens of thousands of feet away from Su Ming, the thin old man's lips curled up in a cruel smile as he continued walking through the forest. He had grown up in this forest since he was young, and even if he had become the patriarch for his tribe, there were few who knew this forest better than he did in the tribe. Using the clues provided by the forest to track down wild beasts was his favorite pastime. Once in a while, he would personally lead his tribe to go through this activity. Right now, he was hunting his prey alone, and this was nothing difficult to him. Looks like this little berserker child is also familiar with the forest. The tracks he set up are pretty good, Buth still 2NA, VE. The old man licked his lips and with one leap, he traveled several hundreds of feet forward. Run. Run faster. The old man's smile became even crueler. However, it was clear that he did not notice Su Ming had used his divine sense to scan the area. Su Ming's face turned pale and his chest continued bleeding as he ran through the forest. This ceaseless fleeing not only made him tired, it also made the murderous aura in his eyes grow stronger. He had brought out a medicinal pill multiple times as he ran, but a glint would appear in his eyes and he would force himself to not use it. It's not time, yet I was originally weaker than he was to begin with. With my injuries now, I'll give an even weaker feeling to that old man, Su Ming muttered under his breath, and he started slowing down. As he slowed down, Su Ming's divine sense immediately noticed that the old man became faster. The distance between them was closing down at an alarming speed. If I turn my head back suddenly, he'll definitely think I'm going for a desperate attack, but the weaker I am, the more he won't be worried about me, since he's so powerful. The murderous aura made the light in Su Ming's eyes flicker, and his body came to a halt before he changed his direction. He no longer ran away but instead dashed towards where the old man was. The two of them might not be able to see each other in the forest with their naked eye, but they could both sense the other person's chi. The instant Su Ming turned around and ran towards him, the old man immediately noticed his actions and a cruel sneer appeared on his lips before his speed increased. A desperate attack, is it? I'll fulfill your wishes. The old man charged forward, and the distance between him and Su Ming started diminishing rapidly when there were only several thousands of feet, multiple trees, and an innumerable amount of leaves between them in the forest that welcomed no light. Su Ming jumped past a big tree, and the murderous glint in his eyes shone as he lifted his right hand and slammed it down towards the ground, his body landing. The instant he slammed his hand down, a beast skin appeared between his right hand and the ground. The beast skin spread outwards until it reached a circular area of 100-something feet, and that area instantly turned into a red meadow. The meadow was red in Su Ming's eyes, but to other people this area still looked no different to the forest around it. The moment the meadow appeared, Su Ming shuddered and instantly sat down cross-legged while bringing out some medicinal pills that could heal him. He quickly swallowed them, and the medicinal pills turned into wisps of warmth that began nourishing his body. Once he swallowed the pills, a freezing glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He lifted his right hand and a white scale appeared in it. This item was a gift from Uncle Master Bai. The scale contained some of his power, and this was Su Ming's final trump card. The green sword mark shone in the center of his brows and lightning swam around his body. Black fog also appeared on his body and turned into his divine general armor, and at the same time, Han Mountain Bell's form began to form faintly within him. Spirit Plunder was also brought out and placed by his side. The pearl floated in midair and shone with an enchanting glow, and like a vacuum that would endlessly suck in other things, it absorbed Su Ming's presence into its own body. Dark clouds filled the sky and dusk was about to be over. The faint form of the moon appeared in the sky along with the setting sun. Not much light was shining on the land, and that little bit of light found it hard to penetrate through the big leaves in the forest. Only a little bit of moonlight fell through, but even so, besides the murderous light and calmness existing in Su Ming's eyes, there was a circle within his eyes that looked like the burning moon. With a freezing glint in his eyes, Su Ming brought out another item, the golden stone coin Tian Lan Meng had given him. Once he held it in his left hand, a vast and seemingly endless amount of spiritual power surged into his body and traveled through the open path within his body before granting incredible power to Su Ming's divine sense, and it was just waiting to attack. Su Ming's breathing gradually evened out until it was eventually so quiet that it could practically not be heard. His eyes were extremely calm, and the murderous aura in his right eye had sunk down as if it was waiting for the critical moment to strike. Su Ming stood up and stepped onto the red meadow, and the moment his presence disappeared, the old patriarch that had closed in was taken aback. However, there was already only 2,000 feet between him and Su Ming. Right when the old man stopped, stunned, a powerful divine sense along with a shocking sword aura sliced through the air from the direction before him, and it did so in a manner that spoke of absolutely wanting to end him with a calmness dripping with killing intent. We have reached the end of chapter 265. The cold eye of the storm is upon us. Su Ming has seen the greed and the pride of the powerful, and his own plans are starting to solidify in the shadows. Thank you for spending your time in the sanctuary at PandaAudioBooks. If today's chapters kept you on the edge of your seat, please leave a like and share the video. Your support is the foundation of this channel and keeps us moving toward the 300th chapter. Do you think Su Ming will play by the rules of the auction, or is he planning something much more chaotic? Let us know in the comments. Until our next session, keep your resolve firm and your path true.